That's for your, if there's room.
There's always room.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 20 hardest games that you can play on PlayStation 5.
Say, but I know you, don't I? In a manner of speaking. You were on the Nautiloid as well.
Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Baldur's Gate 3.
What are you doing? I'm alive, yes. Thank you for the concern.
On the surface, Baldur's Gate 3 looks like it would play like your average tactical RPG, the only exception being the movement doesn't restrict you to a grid, you know, like most tactical RPGs. But the differences go a lot deeper than that. Firstly, the wide variety of status ailments can throw you off if you aren't familiar with the intricacies of tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. Second, the AI is not going to let you off the hook easy, even in the early game, so expect plenty of missed ranged attacks and maybe a downed ally or two, assuming you aren't trying to lone wolf it, which we don't recommend. Please don't do that. It's not smart. Retro Realms, Halloween, and Evil Dead. Retro Realms is enticing enough to attract just about any Halloween or Evil Dead fan. Unfortunately, some folks may not have been too happy with how obscenely unfair the game can get. The key to completing Retro Realms is by switching between dimensions. Jumping between the normal world and the nightmarish demon world will be required every once in a while to progress normally. However, finding every secret will require you to use it way more often than usual. The worst part about this is that because the game is running both worlds at the same time, you can easily wind up spawning right in front of an enemy and get hit before you can even react. Honestly, it's not the most fair game WayForward has ever developed. Lies of P.
There you are. I've been looking all over for you.
Now, those familiar with Lies of P can already summarize this with a simple, oh, this game plays like this other game. And Lies of P certainly does play like one of From Software's famous titles, but the main reason why Neo Wiz and Round 8's game is so difficult is because of the massive enemy variety. It often feels like every corner you turn in Krat hides some new enemy you've never seen before or just haven't seen enough of. In other words, you are constantly learning something new and having to adjust to the situation at hand. Metaphor ReFantazio.
They saw us! On your toes, everyone!
While Atlus has certainly developed tougher games before, looking at you Shin Megami Tensei, Metaphor ReFantazio is the hardest game they've put out in recent years. No, this is not just some, oh, it's Persona but other thing kind of game. Metaphor gives the player more control over their party formation than any other game Atlus has made. You can have characters change archetypes that can affect their stats, abilities, and how often certain enemies may attack them. On top of that, you have to be mindful of whether your characters are at the front of battle or hanging back. Both of these aspects of Metaphor's combat can be a tad confusing for some folks, and it can be easy to mess up the party if you aren't thinking over your battle strategy carefully.
Not done yet. Oh, please.
Nine Souls. One may dismiss Nine Souls as a 2D Dark Souls or a Hollow Knight clone, but honestly, some may find this game to be harder than either of those titles. Unlike Team Cherry's renowned gem, Nine Souls gives the player more tools to dodge and execute unique attacks. Problem is that the game feel is certainly not going to jive with some players. There are definitely some hitboxes that don't look quite right, and the parry mechanic certainly doesn't function the same way as other action platformers or action RPGs. Needless to say, there absolutely is a steep learning curve that is going to require a ton of patience from the player, perhaps more than some are willing to give. Helldivers 2. The first Helldivers game was already notorious for its intense levels of difficulty. Helldivers 2, on the other hand, kind of blows its predecessor out of the water. And we're not just saying that because of the different camera perspective. Between the physics, the environmental hazards, and the friendly fire, there are so many stupid ways to get yourself killed that don't always involve the enemies themselves. Things can get especially stressful when you're trying to input codes to drop additional firepower and supplies onto the battlefield mid-fight. That said, you are always going to feel like you're in a bind and left wondering, how are you even still alive?
Request approved. Deploying reinforcements.
Clare Obscure, Expedition 33.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.
What, the flower? Or Sophie?
Ooh, dark. Sophie would approve.
Though it isn't the most brutal turn-based RPG we have ever played, that doesn't mean Clare Obscure is this super easy cakewalk in comparison. One may point to the many different combat mechanics that can make the game confusing for less experienced players. Most have pointed the finger to the dodge and parry windows as the main reason why they keep dying. Indeed, Clare Obscure's dodge and parry windows are super picky, and they do require precise timing to pull off. While dodging is slightly easier to perform, much of the game depends on your ability to parry, as that will get you out of combat faster and more efficiently. Our advice? Use the spar match against Mael during the prologue to try and get a grasp on the mechanics as early as possible. Trust me, it will help you immensely by the time you hit Act 1. And you don't suffer any consequences for losing, so keep at it.
Well, you sure smell real enough.
No, I don't.
Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake.
Hey, you. Still can't believe this day's finally here.
The original Dragon Quest III is already a super tough game, tougher than the original 2 games. Though the remake does offer some features that make things slightly easier, it doesn't change much in the combat and difficulty scaling. Enemies can still hit just as hard as they did on NES, and the way some weapons function differently than the rest can impede or accelerate your progress depending on how your party is operating. Some players may also wind up frustrated with their AI party members if they're allowing them to act independently. Really, this classic is not for the easily agitated. The First Berserker, Kazan.
さあ、その肉体回復したぞ。感じるか、冥界の力を。
Of all the games that released in 2025, many folks found the first Berserker to be grueling to endure. Fun, but grueling. Despite looking and playing like a From Software game, the first Berserker is a physical and mental test of endurance, specifically when it comes to boss fights. Just a couple of hits from a boss can be enough to put you at death's door, and even when you're landing several meaty hits, you may not be knocking off huge chunks of health as other action RPGs would allow. Your patience will be tested, so it's important that you try not to rush through boss fights and get greedy when they're getting low on health. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black.
誰か、誰やろう、このゼドニアスに他ならん。
そいつは初耳だ。
We spent so many years begging for the return of the 3D Ninja Gaiden games. We finally managed to get a new version of Ninja Gaiden 2, but some of us wound up regretting that wish after playing this one. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is so unnecessarily punishing at times, between bosses turtling and enemies being able to chip off parts of your health bar, that you cannot recover unless you heal in very specific ways. The second level will especially test your BS tolerance, as enemies appear from trap doors, walls, and around corners of super narrow hallways. This is definitely a game you should play at your own risk. You may not feel the same about Ninja Gaiden after this. Demon Souls. Was this the first game you thought of when we started this list? It was for us too. It's kind of the obvious choice if you want a PS5 game that can go hard on you early in the game. That isn't a complaint either. Demon Souls can be great fun, especially if you're playing with friends. The only reason some might disagree is if one may not be familiar with the format of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and the like. Plus, From Software fans have often stated how Demon Souls, even in its remake form, is significantly harder than the rest of the Soulsborne games. God of War Ragnarok.
Got him!
Of course, we could lump everything into the gimme God of War difficulty because why not? I mean, we could just say, yeah, play it on that difficulty and call it a day. However, Ragnarok might be more challenging for some due to occasionally clunky movement and camera placement. And by the time Atreus or Mimir warn you of an enemy attacking behind you, more often than not, it's already too late. It can sometimes make combat more challenging than it probably should be, and if you plan to take on King Hrolf and the rest of the optional berserkers, you're in for a rough time.
Won't be getting any more from those.
Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time.
Crash Bandicoot. At last, I, the great Neo Cortex, have you right where I want you.
Crash 4 was super tough on PS4. Spoiler alert, even with a higher frame rate, the story is no different on PS5. At first, you won't have too much trouble so long as you aren't trying to blaze through every level on your first go, but the later levels might be frustrating for some. From Dingodile's awkward controls to the final few levels chasing after Cortex, Crash 4 can get a bit too demanding at times. And if you want to go for that 100% completion, you will have to beat every single level without dying and go for all of the platinum relics. Ghostrunner. Ghostrunner is absolutely one of the toughest indie games we've played within the last few years. Strange thing is that it isn't even hard in terms of figuring out what to do. For the most part, the difficulty lies within the controls. Just about every action you'll need to do is tied to the shoulder buttons and triggers, and it doesn't exactly feel natural. Sure, you can remap buttons through the PS5 itself, but regardless of how you configure it, it rarely ever seems to make much sense. The game is excellent, don't twist our words, but those controls, man, they take a little bit of getting used to. And I'm somebody who plays a lot of different games with different control schemes. Like a Dragon, Ishin.
後で報いは受けてやる。だがお前らにも女を殴った報いを受けさせてやる。この命知らずが。かかってこい。
The Yakuza, the Like a Dragon series typically leaves the difficulty up to the player. You can play on baby easy goo goo gaga mode, or bump up the challenge to normal or hard, or even the legend difficulty if you're shooting for a tougher New Game Plus. Or if you just want to, brag about the size of your gonads, but you do you. But Ishin introduces its own harder difficulty, dubbed, well, Ishin. Under this, enemies deal significantly more damage and take several hits before finally going down. Bosses, on the other hand, can down you in 1 or 2 hits. Ryuga Gotoku made it so hard that they warn you before beginning the game under the Ishin difficulty, recommending you only play this difficulty when going for New Game Plus. You might want to take that advice. Just saying. Monster Hunter Rise. Funny for us to say that Monster Hunter Rise is hard when many would point it out as the easiest Monster Hunter game in the entire franchise. However, even with that reputation, many are still quick to say it can be quite challenging under various circumstances. Many of the changes in difficulty come primarily in the form of refinement in UI and controls. You still have plenty of formidable beasts to hunt down, and none are gonna go down without a fight. That said, the same level of challenge found in previous games still remains in Monster Hunter Rise. Menus and controls just aren't as cumbersome as previous entries. But don't expect it to be a cakewalk either. Marvel's Midnight Suns. Midnight Suns will kick your ass. Sorry to come out with the most blunt statement about it, but it is the honest truth. At first, the combat can feel very restrictive, as you can only play so many cards each turn. Plus, interacting with the environment and using some cards will cost you heroism. In other words, the order you play cards and perform actions can drastically affect the outcome of a battle if you play cards too recklessly.
I'm gonna get you!
And if you haven't been spending a good amount of time in the Abbey, you may run into some fights where your fighters feel severely underpowered. Careful and efficient planning is key to beating Midnight Suns. Trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience here. I'm still not done with the game. I have just the 3rd act left, at least at the time of this recording, and it is still incredibly hard, even at normal difficulty, and I have a ton of upgraded cards. Just find your tactics, and you'll be able to take on just about anything. It won't be easy, but it'll at least be easier than if you played it like a regular card game. Nioh II.
And we must all one day leave it.
Simply Google, "Is Nioh II hard?" and you will find no shortage of players having a harder time with this game compared to its predecessor. Unlike most of our other entries with their complex mechanics or high demands for completion bonuses, Nioh II gets its notorious reputation for difficulty in a simpler fashion: enemy variety. There are way more enemies with their own patterns than there were in the first game, meaning you cannot approach a combat encounter the same way as a previous one. Well, for the most part anyways. Returnal. Only Housemarque would develop a game so excruciating. We mean that in a positive light, by the by. Returnal is easily the hardest PS5 game to come from Sony's first-party studios. To elaborate, bullet hell games are typically done with a top-down view, allowing the player to see just about every projectile on the screen. This gives them enough time to react and adjust their position. But Returnal, as you can see, does not use that, and instead uses an over-the-shoulder camera, which obstructs a good portion of your vision on one side. With so many projectiles flying all over the place, you may as well throw no damage runs out the window. My friend Peppa Pig.
I know. Why don't you help me, Pip?
Help Peppa and Grandpa grow a new plant in the garden.
It's a real test in mental fortitude with this brat following you around. And I can't believe I platinumed this game twice. No, our final entry is actually Elden Ring. It is no surprise that Elden Ring, despite the noticeably large number of players who have earned the Platinum Trophy, is the toughest game to play on PlayStation 5. While the game does give you plenty of freedom to build your character how you want and explore just about any location to your heart's content, there are moments where your stats will affect how challenging certain fights are. If you haven't been investing your stats wisely, you might end up ramming your head into a wall. A strategy guide is almost required if you aren't familiar with From Software's previous games. You thought Demon Souls was tough? You ain't seen nothing yet, bud. What's the toughest game you've played on PS5? Did it make our list? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to MojoPlays for more great videos every day.